back pain. So the doctor gave him a prescription pill.
Oh my gosh.
Went to the pharmacy to get it filled. And the pharmacy said, before I fill this, let me see your wallet. He pulled out this huge, thick wallet.
Listen, had he been watching Seinfeld?
Put it in a pocket for a while. See what that does for you. Cleared it all up.
Oh my gosh, that's
He
amazing.
was throwing his back up by sitting on that thick a wallet.
I haven't carried a wallet in my back pocket for years. It's always been front pocket.
I think I stopped.
Well,
That's about when he started carrying his in his front pocket.
oh yeah. Oh, I forgot where I carried it.
In the
I
trench
I
coat.
carried my coat, unless it's not winter. But I made this back when our older son went through, was it Bobcat or Wolf Tiger?
Wolf.
Yeah,
Wolf, that's the first one.
Anyways,
Well,
like
that's the second one now. The second one now? Tiger
bear.
Goes. Tiger, wolf, bear.
He was in second grade at the time.
20 years ago
And
now.
I was his gym leader.
Keep on train that one.
Nice.
He made himself.
Yeah. I mean, I keep using them just because it reminds me of that time that that we had together, and I would use it till it fell apart and not falling apart.
That's
He
nice.
lost his. We made it at the same time. And I wasn't gonna put one together. I was just gonna help one of the kids, and then my assistant gym leader is the one that found all these. He says, "Oh, Terry, you gotta make one too." He says, "There's an extra one for you, one for me too." So we all made one. Still got mine. I don't know about the rest of the kids, but I know Terry didn't have his.
Chris, there's some wine here you can't drink.
Says who?
Hey.
If you put it in front of me, I have to obey scripture. Do not ask what is put in front of you.
Oh, it's
Ooh,
true.
there you go.
Hey, here's some grape juice.
Scripture.
Yeah, it's grape juice.
I gotta obey scripture. I gotta obey
No.
the Lord.
Listen,
No
I
food
feel like
sacrifice
you're much
out
more
here.
on the edge now. You're like,
I'm on the edge. All right,
go ahead, fire me.
So Rebecca tonight has brought a Cycles Gladiator 2017 California Merlot.
I did.
So Gladiator
And it
and
actually
Cycles.
tastes
A little
good.
plug for you guys tonight. It is the
That's tonight's
The-
Verum wine.
the night's Verum wine. Ooh, that should be a
Verum
thing. That should be a thing where we have.
You're starting a vineyard next at
Truth
your,
wine.
at your farm.
Yeah.
No.
True vine?
The I am the true
I am the
vine.
vine.
Have you guys visited the first
Oh,
vineyard
dear.
yet and gone out there?
Yeah.
You know there's a church meeting there now? They've rented it out like on Sundays to a church.
Oh, really?
Where?
As they should.
As
Are
they
they
should.
Catholic?
New wine.
I don't know, they could be vineyard.
We shot a wedding there
Did you?
many moons ago.
Yeah.
Where at?
At
Did he tell
First
you all the
Vineyard.
history and the story of the place?
Actually,
Yeah, actually he did because we went and scouted
Yeah.
it first before we
went,
shot
and
the
so
wedding.
we saw all the memorabilia on the wall and letters from Thomas
Told us
Jefferson.
about the hidden,
Now, the wine is
uh,
different now.
It's different now, but
Yeah.
Oh, the wine we had then, it was like Schitt's Creek.
Isn't
Why?
that bad?
Well, it was like apple pie wine, and you
So
know,
the stuff I get every year for Christmas.
It was,
which is good for what it is, but it's not. You know,
it was like candy wine.
we're looking
Yes.
for like the
People's
Cycles
grape.
Gladiator 2017 California Merlot.
Yeah,
There it is.
It was a quick walk in,
And
and
I
I
was-
was like, ooh, that's a twist.
I was trying to figure
good
out.
at plugs.
I was like, there's like this naked nymph lady, and then she's got like wings on her petals.
Is it a nymph or oh, no? It's a nymph. I would say it's not a siren because
No, I
she
didn't-
doesn't have fins.
Yeah, but she has wings on her bike pedals.
Because this was literally a 2-second walk in. I was like, oh, I like that bottle. Let's go.
Yep, it's a good bottle.
And it's good.
I like the artwork.
Everything about it's
That's all she
good.
cares about is the artwork.
I wanted to know if it was good artwork.
If they care about the artwork on the label, then they're going to care about the product inside.
Like I love the Heart of Man wines
Yeah.
artwork.
Is there a...
He had a limited release that Brooklyn had made for him. Yeah,
Really?
It's beautiful. I have it on the
we've
shelf at home.
not
We've
taken
not
a
broken it
drink
open
because
it's so pretty.
Heart of wine.
The Heart of
Heart of
Man.
Man.
Remember that movie that was released? And so they did a wine, and Tony gave us a bottle.
it's on Amazon, right?
Huh?
Isn't the
Oh, the movie's on Amazon
Yeah.
Prime
And
for free.
Ooh.
I mean, if you have Prime.
it's if you have Prime, it's for free. So Heart of Man on Amazon. It's. Are you listening?
excellent.
It's a pretty good movie.
Oh, it's really good.
It's
Very good.
touches on some deep.
All right. So are we ready to tackle some Solzhenitsyn? Huh?
And sensual. Heart of man.
Oh well.
A lot of interplay between the man and the woman in the movie.
Yeah, I mean that's the point.
That's the point. We
Yeah.
got that point across.
Yeah.
He actually changed it. It was, I think it was Hearts of Men.
Mhm.
And they changed it to Heart of Man.
which is
To encompass mankind.
Everyone.
it covers everybody.
We've seen several
Good
versions
call.
of it because we got to see the early versions. So they'd send us like this cut and then the next cut and then the final cut was fantastic.
So basically, they couldn't have made it without us.
Basically, we are the reason it exists. I was there for the premiere in Hollywood, so.
Yeah.
And I sat next to William Paul Young,
Oh.
who, by the way, is the most sweet man on the planet Earth.
If you guys haven't read The Shack, it's fantastic.
Yes. One of
The Shack is so good. I didn't read it for many years because I didn't read it for years because it was so popular, and then I heard it was heretical, and
Oh, gosh,
but
it's
I
so
read it
good.
and I was in a much better place, and I read it and I thought this is.
I read it and I was like,
She-
I read it
yeah.
in a day and I'm like, I need you to read this right now because it has profoundly affected
We
my
need to
heart.
talk about this. I need you to be on my level, basically. All right, this is what day of the week is this? Monday. I mean, what date of the month is this? The 8th, March 8th, 2021.
Oh, good Lord.
Verum Fabula, and we're going to be talking about. We're still on Solzhenitsyn, the Nobel Lecture on Literature, and this is like a fine wine. We've taken our time and we've sipped it here and there, and we've discussed the notes, and yeah, it's very much like a Cycles Gladiator 2017 California Merlot. Oh yeah. So, we're on page 15 of 38, and this is part 4. We've been it's been really fun to watch how the different, because every person here has a different perspective. Everybody has it hits them a little differently, and so we want to give everybody a chance to wrestle this out. As I told my daughter today as we were going over math problems, I don't need this. You know, it's like, it's not for me. I know how to work the problem, you know. And so I know what I've got out of this book. I don't need to read the book again for me, but I thought it would be so good to have other perspectives wrestle with this and let me see where I line up. And it's like, oh, did I get something wrong here? But also because I think it's going to hit each of us a little differently. But it's going to hit a place inside of us that, I mean, it's just, one, the prose is beautiful if you have the Thomas P. Whitney translation. All the other translations are nice as well. I feel like this one to me reads sort of like the King James version, the poetry of that, you know. So I kind of like that. We're going to get into it here and continue on. So we were talking about scales of justice and how he made such a great point last time that if everybody is on the same page and every culture is tied together, sort of a quote-unquote one world type government, and if everything is the same, then if there's an infection, if there's a bacteria, it wipes everything out. And so now what happens in Indiana will hurt something in Nepal because it's just interconnected like that. And so instead of something being isolated in Indiana, affecting Indiana, and a thing in Nepal has, you know, you read about it years later, but it's not that instantaneous connection which you get with Instagram. Put something up, and we know about things that happen in Arizona, a big fight, you know, and you go, whoa, okay.
Bath and Body Works fight.
And that causes
God.
people to be frustrated here that otherwise wouldn't know about it. So there's positives and negatives to
Yeah.
that. So we're talking about scales of this. And we're going to start on the end of page 15. On one side of the scale, amid persecution which yielding nothing to those of ancient Rome, hundreds of thousands of silent, unheard Christians sacrificed their lives for their faith in God. And in the other hemispheres, a certain madman, no doubt not the only one either, dashed across the ocean to free us from religion with a blow of steel directed at the pontiff. On the basis of his own scale, he undertook to make his decision for all the rest of us. Anybody want to take a stab?
What section are we in right now? What number?
Page 15 on the Thomas P. Whitney.
Well, he doesn't have that.
The very last one says it starts on the side of the scale.
Of
It
which
says,
chapter?
you know, it's divided into 5, 6, 7, like everything.
Oh, it's we're chapter 4, so almost at the end.
doing it.
Where you started reading my translation, it starts, in one region not so long ago, hundreds of thousands of voiceless Christians laid down their lives for their faith in God, amid persecution that yielded nothing to bad men. No. And the other hemisphere, that line, I'm going to check with yours.
Yeah.
Translation ebbs and flows as far as how well it matches yours.
Drifts.
And so, what's he saying? He's saying that in one hemisphere, there's a lockdown. In the other hemisphere, one person in one hemisphere uses their power and influence to cause suffering. And in the other hemisphere, a person uses their power to set us free, to release us from oppression. On the basis of his own scale, he undertook to make this decision for all the rest of us. On the basis of his own scale, he undertook this.
Socialist, right?
Hold on that for a second.
I remember that quote from Peterson about socialism. He started with everybody else.
Yeah, so in a sense, both guys are undertaking something for everyone else. You guys get that? So it says one, on one side of the scale, amid persecutions which yielded nothing to those of ancient Rome, hundreds of thousands, silently unheard Christians sacrifice their lives. So they sacrifice their lives for Christ. One person is causing all this. He goes, on the other side of the hemisphere, a certain madman dashed across the sea to free us from religion. It's interesting he said a madman to free us from tyranny. On one side of the hemisphere, people are dying under this tyranny, hundreds of thousands, and this one guy is a madman, looks at the pontiff, the church, and says, I'm going to free this tyranny as well. Now, Miriam, you said something last time as I was sharing my opinions on some political stuff, which I don't often do, where people can readily criticize it, because sometimes I don't think my opinions are that important when it comes to the political stuff. But you mentioned something, and I thought you mentioned that the Republicans were also doing something that I said similar that the Democrats were doing. And I was listening to Jordan Peterson and Gad Saad do a talk about infectious ideologies. And what's interesting is, at least I think it's interesting, ideas and ideologies can be radicalized on either side of the aisle. Whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, if you buy into an ideology wholesale, it can radicalize you and be as equally as infectious on either side. So what I'm trying to do here in VFF and Unabashedly Resolute is I'm trying to find a harmony. I'm trying to find a balance between imagination and reason, between liberalism and conservatism. There's a balance to be struck. And when we get off too far to one side, then we kind of lose our bearings. But we're all prejudiced. Like every one of us, we're prejudiced. We're prone to stereotypes. We're bent towards the things that we like. And actually, Paul says we have an affinity to do the things that we shouldn't do. We are bent creatures. And when we choose an ideology and we say, I'm going to follow this ideology, when we get information that contradicts our ideology, we have a choice. What do we do with it? Do we figure out what part of that new information is true and expand our ideology, or do we let the watchful dragons incinerate it and reject it, and then we don't grow anymore? And so I think that's very important to see here, that our choices and how we take the stimuli, how we take the information coming in, it's important that we do it with balance. And I don't mean moderation. I don't mean 50-50. I don't mean compromise. When I say that, I mean balance. That there is a right and there is a wrong, and I need to find what is the optimal state of this statement someone's given me. Is there any truth in it? If there is, what can I take out of this and apply it to my life and expand and become a richer human, a more solid creature? Men with chests, if you will, from C.S. Lewis. Does someone else want to read?
I'll read.
Because my brain's going a little quick, and I'm...
Where am I starting?
right there.
What on one scale of value seems from a distance to be an enviable and blessed freedom, on another scale, close up, is perceived as a regrettable compulsion obliging us to overturn buses. What in one region would be dreamed of as a totally improbable prosperity and well-being, in another arouses outrage as savage exploitation that calls for an immediate strike. Various scales exist for natural catastrophes. A flood which takes 200,000 lives seems a less important event than some accident in our own town. There are different scales for insults to persons. In some places, even an ironic smirk or a gesture of dismissal is a humiliation, while in others, cruel beatings are regarded as being just as forgivable as a bad joke. There are different scales for punishments and for evil deeds. According to one scale, a month of arrest or of exile to a rural area or confinement in a punishment cell where the prisoner is fed on white rolls and milk shakes the imagination and floods the columns of the newspapers with rage. And on another scale, prison terms of 25 years in punishment cells with ice on the walls in which prisoners are forced to undress down to their underwear in insane asylums for healthy people, and shots fired by border guards into innumerable unreasonable people who are always for some strange reason trying to escape, all these things are quite ordinary, excusable. And the heart is particularly at ease with that exotic land about which in fact nothing at all is really known, whence no news at all of actual events reaches our ears except the tardy and trivial conjectures of a few correspondents. And for this dichotomy, for this dumbfounded incapacity to grasp someone else's far-off grief, one cannot reproach human eyesight. That is the way the human being is. But for humanity as a whole, packed into one single clump, such mutual lack of understanding carries the threat of a quick and stormy death. Given the existence of 6 or 4 or even 2 scales of values, there can be no united world, no united humanity. We will be torn apart by this difference in rhythm, this difference in oscillation. We will not survive on one earth, just as no man can survive with 2 hearts.
Wow.
Basically, sounds like we attack the things that we don't understand.
Yeah. Stephen, you think? It's all right if you don't.
I think that's, when you go on social media and you see all these people that are offended or outraged at this, and they're not stopping to think what filter they're looking through as they're reading about this event. And they have no idea, they don't take the time to learn about the actual situation and all the variables surrounding that situation that makes it why it came out this way here, and don't care to even try to understand how it can be so different than what they're used to over at their own point.
Very good.
It is a weird phenomenon too, because you get on there, and I don't know if this happens for everybody, it definitely happens for me, where I get offended and I'm like, why am I offended? What? I don't care. There's like this mechanism that kicks in, and I'm like, get sweaty, my face feels like it's hot, and I'm like, it's okay. Like, I don't need to protect myself from information. I can just chill out. I don't have to prove them wrong. It's a weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
My little theme song rolling in my head as I look at Facebook and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the patch where they're all just crazy. Just keep scrolling. Just keep scrolling. Find Dory's song and Finding Nemo. Just keep scrolling. He said, just keep swimming. Just keep scrolling. Just keep scrolling. Sooner or later you'll get to the cute puppy you said make you laugh. And you forget about all that nasty stuff.
So, do you think that with the old adage, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, do you think there was a reason why they even came up with that phrase?
Because words can hurt.
Yeah.
They can, but only if you let them.
True.
You're the one who determines if something offends you to the point where you're hurt. Do we look and do we say, when we're scrolling social media, you can't hurt me? Because in person, how many times do these interactions like on social media, how often do they happen in person? Occasionally you get somebody who's a little rambunctious or obnoxious, but most of the time they don't. So when you're scrolling through there, and you said it, it's not your job to make them change their mind. But we feel like, no, you've offended my scales.
Yeah.
Like your scales are wrong. This is how mere Christianity begins. It says, if people are quarreling, this is a good indication that there's objective right and wrong. Or we wouldn't be quarreling. So there is objective right and wrong because I say this, you're like, it's this. And we have these different rhythms, right? So he's saying we have these different rhythms. And when I come in and I try to force my rhythm on you, what happens is if you have something that's in perfect rhythm and it's in time and it's musical, you have music. What happens when it's out of time? What happens when it's played at the wrong moment? It's noise, right?
It's just like learning a new language.
Rails.
You have to do it in the same cadence as the native speaker speaks it. Otherwise, they can't understand what you're saying.
Right. And you know yourself, you have families where you're like, oh, yeah, this is common in my family. You're like, well, that's not good that's your rhythm, but you've learned how to operate inside of that rhythm. And
I remember that back when I first got married, because his family's way of joking and sense of humor with each other is more slight digs at each other and slams and stuff. And that was what's called dad jokes now. Puns, bad puns. That was our type of humor that I grew up with and stuff. And it took a little while to get used to the slams of it. I've grown into it, after 30 years, I'm used to it and stuff. And
right.
I can give as good as I get now.
Right. But you guys have your own rhythm, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So one could look at this and say that this is an indictment against globalism, and saying that globalism is a utopian dream that actually is going to be a nightmare. It's a utopian nightmare in a sense. If we're all have the same rhythm, even though we can't. I mean, just think about the difference in environment from one state to the next. Crops, resources. Those are all different, which requires different tools and different responses. Why do you think, this is going to get political again, but he is getting political. Top-down policies rarely work because they're not nuanced enough for the individuals or the groups of individuals that have a different rhythm. That is why the founders created the federalism system, which gave states the right to. That's why we have states and we have counties and we have cities. Is because and they all have somebody to oversee that because, your Lexington's different than Frankfort. Frankfort is different than Shelbyville, and all these. Ashland is way different than the rest of them. So if you put a top down, now this policy goes for all jobs. You're like, wait, well, it can't be because this job is this job is this. We have these. This criteria has to be met, and there's different rhythms over here. It's like, no, you have to do this thing, and it never, ever works. And I think for me, I read this, and I was thinking globalism versus what I don't actually know the term, but I'm calling it localism because I'm so. Someone knows a better term for it than that. That's fine.
Regionalism.
Huh?
Regionalism.
I guess you could say
That's
federalism.
hard.
I guess you could say globalism versus federalism. I guess you could go with that. But the last two lines here, given the existence of 6 or 4 or even 2 scales of values, there can be no united world. You go, wow, there can be no united world. Just two. I mean, just think of a marriage. How hard is it to stay in rhythm? I said in marriage, how hard is it to stay in rhythm? And that's just two rhythms.
Yep.
Two different thinking processes. Now multiply that by 330 million people. How hard is it? This is what I thought was so funny when the EU and everybody in Europe it was kind of like, we're going to create the European Union and we're going to show you Americans how this is done. We're going to take all these multicultural rhythms and we're going to show you how to do this in harmony. And it was an utter failure because it's not easy to be a melting pot. It is actually extremely difficult. The South, the North, just think, we make Tennessee and Kentucky, we make fun of each other. So close. I mean, we're so close. But there are still different rhythms in each state that go along. So he says, we will not survive on one earth, just as no man can survive two hearts. I mean, that's beautiful how he says that. But we will not survive until Christ comes and alleviates us from our duplicitousness.
Is that what he's trying to say?
I think so. If somebody has another
It
interpretation.
seemed kind of final. He's like, we can't be unified here.
Well, I think if you can show me a time in history where we've been unified. I'm reading the first conspiracy about George Washington. There was a plot to assassinate George Washington by his Secret Service then. And there was anarchy in the streets, the Loyalists versus the Americans, and they had barricades. There was clandestine stuff going on. People would get beat up and thrown out of town, and you're going, wow, this not much has changed. You know, like, and you go, that's because that is the human experience. Is you and I don't get along, so you're wrong, and because you're wrong, I want to ostracize you out of there.
I feel like there's unity in times of great tragedy, and the last time I really remember that's 9/11.
That's
Yeah.
Everyone felt kind of unified.
Saying in
It
Israel,
didn't last long.
yeah.
in Israel they love the people there that like whenever they kind of like the wars because everybody's so unified. But when the wars are not happening, Israel is so divided and no one gets along. Like the Orthodox don't like these people. There's tons of prejudice. The Ashkenazis are prejudiced against the Ethiopian Jews.
Yep.
There's all kinds of races. There's all kinds of stuff. But when there's a war, everybody gets along and everybody suddenly is in one boat
So
together
weird.
and they love each other. They're all Jews.
So why do you think? So let's say, because we all have different rhythms. Everybody here has a different rhythm. So how do we come together and unite? What is the thing that actually unites us?
War.
Fences.
I said war, you said
Offenses.
fences.
I think both of those are wrong.
I can make an case for this.
Obviously, yeah.
What, commonality?
Fences
So
make
what?
good neighbors.
So what is it that unites us that is not us? There's something transcendent above us and not Christ. I'm not talking about that. What is it that unites us in this group as human individuals that we are willing to spend a Monday night with each other in our non-circadian rhythms?
Search for truth
That's the knowledge outside of what we know.
and search for relationship with others who are seeking the same thing.
And you know what we use to articulate that. I'm sorry, I'm gone into teacher mode. I'm sorry. Nina gave me side eye, and I was like,
This is how he'll talk to me, and I'm like, stop talking to me like I'm a student.
But we're all students, you know?
in the theater of life.
Well, I mean,
Theater of life, that is.
we come together to communicate, to get what's in our brain out and throw it at each other and try to, tear things apart. And, I'm not going to get anywhere if I don't open my mouth and communicate what's in the thing.
Right.
So
you're willing to be uncomfortable, right? You're willing to be offended. So that's the thing is, if you're not willing to be offended, VFF is not for you. We come here and we are going to be uncomfortable.
Because there are several different.
You guys snowflake.
No snowflakes here, because there's so many different personalities and ideologies even within this group.
Now, that's still not. I'm going to get to where I'm going with this. We create symbols that unify us, that articulate the notion that we can all rally around. And for us, it is the letters VFF and the emblem of Aslan. VFF, that is the emblem. So when we send out things like that, that is when a business creates their logo, that is the thing that will unify all these different rhythms, because that emblem represents a mission statement that transcends everybody, and they can all point to that and go, we're going for that. I'm not going for this. We're pointing at the emblem. So in America, what we have some of those emblems, those symbols. One is...
ish these days. It's the flag.
Yes.
Ish.
And why do you think it was important for it to be disparaged?
What do you mean? Important for it to be disparaged?
Why were some people so dead set on disparaging it and creating it to be a controversial thing? Because it did unify. It was the symbol. And so if you can poke holes in that, you will actually cause disharmony, because what will unify us together? Well, at this point, if we can't look at that and all say, that's where we're pointing, and they go, no, that's not the symbol. And we go, then what is? It's this, and it's this, and suddenly it's chaos. But when there is an emblem, that's why we raise the flag and wave the flag, because it's something that we can go, all right, I'm going to put my individualism down, and I'm going to point at that. And that's what we're aiming at. Not my rhythm, not your rhythm, but that political aim. And it's a symbol of liberty and of freedom and all these things. And so when you begin to say, no, that flag is not, then suddenly we don't know where to point. And as a nation, then suddenly we're faced with, oh, I don't like you. Well, I don't like you. You're off, and this, and then there's nothing unifying. And so that's why the church had icons. That's why countries all have flags and anthems. It's all things to let us transcend above ourselves, so we can find a rhythm in that. So that's...
So something I've noticed, because my family is from Appalachia area, not a lot of education. My aunts, most of them didn't even graduate 8th grade. So they just don't have a high level of education. So what they know is what they know. That's it. They know this little, the holler, and that's it. They've never been to the beach. They've never been outside, most of the time, even Kentucky. So what I have noticed with my family is COVID has really, the only way for them to communicate is through their phone. They get their news through Facebook. They get their news through anything on here that is really not news, because a lot of them don't even have cable. Mm-hmm. They don't have access to real news. So their phone is their source, and they go to, for lack of education, Facebook. So what I have seen is that COVID has inadvertently caused them and their ideas and their lack of education to kind of be their source of truth, and now that has become their standing ground. And so they don't see it any other way. They don't see any other opinion outside of what they see as their right, their ego.
They isolate themselves in their guys.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
And they don't have to leave their region to share that information,
Right.
which can be dangerous.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I see COVID and the lack of this, the connection and the community, because they don't go out. They already didn't have a big source of community. but now it's even smaller. Now it is just their people. It is just my family. And then when like me, my sister, and my dad, who is the only one that kind of got out, and we're educated, they don't like us. We have different opinions, and we bring in ideas that they don't agree with because we are wrong. And it's so you try to ask why, and they can't even articulate why. And then they go back to the Bible of, well, this is what the Bible says. Well, tell me where that is said in the Bible. Well, I saw it on Facebook. It has to be true. I'm like, okay, but we're not even. It's talking in circles, and they aren't able to even communicate. And I just feel like that has made our society as a whole, just seeing that little picture, that I can just imagine that at a broader scale. It's definitely, I think, has made it worse.
When you have your entire world set up and you have your worldview built, and somebody comes through and says, well, that pillar is not actually a pillar.
Right.
So imagine you're bringing your ideas into the column.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
It is like someone picked you up and dropped you in the Amazon rainforest and said, okay, because if I'm wrong about this, then what else am I wrong about? And suddenly they don't know what to believe, and it causes psychological trauma. It actually does. It actually is a psychological, it's like when you pull up a rat, the first thing a rat does is freeze. It's like, I don't know where I am. I don't know where the danger is. And so when you introduce these new ideas into those areas, they don't know now. I don't know what truth is. So also, what could kill me? I don't know what the bad stuff is. And so they're just frozen, and they know how to operate inside the holler, and it works. Like Newtonian physics got us to the moon, but there's quantum physics, which is beyond that. And you go, and actually quantum physics seems to be more true than the Newtonian physics in a sense. And you go, okay, we'll stick with the moon. You guys can have all the theories out there, and so, and it's tough.
Yeah.
But Stephen said it when he first came in. When I go on Facebook, I don't have to be right, and I don't have to prove you wrong.
And that's where it's been very interesting of learning, because they feel so right. And they feel so convicted because they tie themselves to Christianity and the Bible. And they are like, this is what God would want me to do, is stand up for this. And that is where it becomes a big,
and Carl Jung says this. You guys have heard me say it many times, but you're new, so you'll hear this 100 times. Ideas have you more than you have ideas. Yeah. And so when you get to an ideology, like I was talking to Miriam, any ideology can radicalize you to where you're like, I'm shut off from anything else. And I know I was in a theological cult, actually a couple. It doesn't say a lot about this. This is not one.
This is our favorite one.
At least it thinks that. We would never know.
Yeah, well that's 20 years from now, they'll be like, that VFF, that cult that they had.
There's no leader. We're just doing stuff.
But what? I don't want to be afraid to be wrong. Yes. And that's the thing, is I'm okay knowing what I can know, and then have somebody say, oh, you're completely wrong. Okay, show me the evidence. Oh, all right, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
C.S. Lewis says, my image of God is not divine, and it must be shattered.
Yep.
And it's he who does the shattering. But, because when you said they're tied to Christianity, one of the things that happens a lot to a lot of young Christians is they don't understand Christianity, so they have an interpretation of Christianity. When they go into university, the professors destroy that version of Christianity because most of it wasn't real anyway, and they freak out because they're in the middle of the rainforest and they don't know what's poisonous and what's not, and they just basically collapse.
That's what I just talked to my students about. This is why you have to have a basic foundation, because you go 20, 30 years, and but at some point it's going to get shaky. That's good.
Yeah, and you have to. And so by me saying, I'm not afraid to be wrong, and I sort of live in a perpetual uncomfortableness, okay. I'm more worried about truth than I am being comfortable. If truth makes me uncomfortable, fantastic. I'll get used to being uncomfortable. I don't want to be so comfortable in my beliefs that I refuse to hear anybody. I've wrestled with everything: atheism, Hinduism, Buddhism, even inside Christianity. I've looked at open theism. I've looked at universalism. I've looked at, the emergent church was, progressive Christianity. I've looked at all these things, and they're ideas. Yeah, they can have you, but Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The serpents won't hurt you. The poisons they won't kill you. It's okay, as long as you don't start to enjoy the poison, and then that's all you want to drink. You're addicted to it." So, all right, we're going to move on here. Not because that wasn't fantastic. That was really good conversation to pull apart. But
Stick with that for a while.
Yeah.
we are chapter 5.
Okay. Further than the top.
Yeah, look at that. We are cruising.
Before we keep moving, I want to throw something in here.
Oh.
Do it.
I want to throw something in here because
Let's put the book
I
down.
look at it from different sides, like a couple different points. Jesus intentionally spent a lot of time in Galilee. He spent a lot of artistic intentions painting Galilee. He chose the holler of Israel to call his disciples.
Yes.
And it literally is the holler of
Yep.
Israel. So I'm just very sensitive to your statements. I understand, I've heard these before. I'm sensitive to make sure I have both perspectives because I love rural communities.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've recognized is that they're not very valued and they're not very honored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of does that make sense?
No, it's very true.
And it's and there's also, I want to put this from a different perspective. One of the things that when I was in graduate school, I studied a lot of postmodernism, which makes me have no faith in postmodernism. But one of the major books of postmodernism was a book called Future Shock. If you've ever, it was written in 84. But it basically details the breakdown of American culture that happened in the 20th century because we left communities like Eastern Kentucky. We left communities that were multi-generational family communities. And then by the mid-20th century, people were disconnected from family, which was causing emotional, it was breaking down other systems because there was no brother or sister close to you or parents or uncles. And tradition throughout history, we'd raise each other in multi-generational families, so there was a support structure. So I'm trying to throw another side of this too. So
It's
on
very
one
good.
side you have a diminishing education, but another side is this: there is passed down wisdom that I would put up against any seminary or university professor. I'm saying that as a university professor.
Miss some of my family.
It's possible.
But I
It's
do
possible.
understand.
But I mean,
Yeah.
maybe one thing is it's possible, but
So the unfortunate side effect of what my family has seen in the holler, and this is only a portion of them, because I do agree with you on that.
I'm just
other
throwing
side.
something in there.
Yeah, because on
Honor.
the other side, there is a lot that is thrown in, and they've learned, and you can go and learn an immense amount of knowledge about snakes and the mushrooms and the land itself.
Within the holler,
Yes,
they can tell you, they know
everything. But the unfortunate part that has affected most of my family that still lives there are the drugs.
absolutely.
And they live on welfare. They have zero desire to get out, to fend for themselves at all. They live on people feeling sorry for them, unfortunately, and getting money from those people. And it's being recorded, so I can't really say which one, but one of them has burned down his house 3 different times just to get money from it. And he lives in a world of just chaos, and that's what he loves. Fortunately, though, their children that's where I'm starting to see, because I've made connections with a lot of my cousins that I didn't grow up with because we weren't really allowed around that kind of stuff. But now we are becoming closer, and they're seeing me as more of and my sister, kind of a beacon of hope, for lack of better words, because I don't care that that's where they came from. But if you want help, you can reach out to me and come and see Lexington and come and see a different world. And that's excellent.
Now, I wasn't saying that as an
No,
attack
no,
against what
no,
we're saying.
absolutely not.
I
It's
was just saying it as like a
different-
different perspective.
Absolutely, it's, and I think there's so much in it when you see it and you like watch them live it that it's like.
So these are the different rhythms that he was
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And Chris brings up a great point. And the issues are multivariant. It's not a simple issue
not
of
simple.
if
Right.
they just had
Absolutely.
education,
No.
that they would be fine. He who should not be named for legal issues said this great one thing. He said, if you take a criminal, somebody who's pickpockets on the street, and you give them an education, or he said, he said if you take somebody who steals train ties, like the ties that and sells them, from scrap metal and things, and you take him and you give him an education, but you don't change his heart, he'll steal the entire railway when he gets educated.
And yes, I can
And so
see
it's
that.
not education alone that does it. It's a heart change. And actually, Chris, as you're talking, I was thinking about being in Oklahoma, and also being with farmers. And what's amazing is a lot of times in these rural communities, there is more honesty because they can't lie to one another. Because if they do, they starve or they go hungry. So. Like,
At least when it comes to their farms,
the farm,
their
like,
animals.
I'm not going to lie to you about this because I need you to help me when I need help. So there's some honesty in that comes through that usually rural communities have because they're so dependent on each other. Where you come to a place like Lexington, and we lived in Masterson Station. We never saw our neighbors. It was like outdoor apartments.
Yeah.
And lights were all off. We didn't know anyone who lived around us. This is really weird. Why? So, the situation is multivariant. It's complex. It's not simple. It's not easy. And there are great rhythms to be learned from the rural community. There are also some rhythms to be learned from the urban communities as well. And that's why we need the harmony. We need the balance of that. And if the rural community can open up and bring some of the urban thinking in, and then the urban can bring some of the rural thinking in, then
It's like a deference or an honoring of one another is kind of what I'm looking
honoring.
for.
Yes, I think that's a
Well,
great way
we
to
tend
look at it.
to operate out of a self-preservation, and
Yes.
and we treat that as a norm, and that's not necessarily healthy. But we all do it. It doesn't matter whether it's at family level, whether it's rural, urban, whatever. It's we all try to safeguard what we know.
Yeah.
So we're willing to fight off anybody that tries to tell us anything different.
C.S.
And
Lewis
so-
says when
So if you, it's like the one saying, it's like if you try to change a man against his opinion, he remains of the opinion still, or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Man commits against his will remains of his own opinion still.
yeah.
That's right. And C.S. Lewis says that if
So there's got to be there has to be trust built in there through relationship of some kind in order for any change to happen, and it has to go both ways.
yes,
It can't be an us versus them or
I'm
them
gonna
versus
tell you
us or
what's
whatever.
right.
Yes.
and that's what social media
That's
does not have. There is no trust. I don't trust you to tell me something on there. I don't know who you are. Why?
Yeah.
Your opinion. So I'm automatically defensive because I don't know who you are. There's no trust. And sometimes
Because I see, more than once on Facebook, I know it's true. I know that Facebook is telling me the truth. So the opinion goes.
And that unfortunately is
This
side.
interesting principle. We keep going.
No, that's an interesting side because that's what my family does, but I do the opposite. I'm like, ooh, that doesn't
Yeah.
seem right.
Second
Well, there's this
opinion.
principle at
Yeah.
chapel that started a number of years ago where people would have multiple faces. I've been talking about Asbury University, and Brad, who's one of my best friends, he was a graphic designer for the school. So he was the one who was involved in all the technology of stuff. And we were sitting in chapel one day, and he's like, "Have you seen Yakety Yak? Like, is that what's that called? That app that's like you just like open texting in an area, which is like
Yik
Yik Yak.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like he's like, I want you to look and see what students are posting during chapel. And what we found was like the most obscene, horrific things they're posting because they felt anonymous.
Yep.
Because there was some kind of like, there's something that goes on where you're like, this is what I've seen with social media. It's like there's a sense of like herd mentality where like it doesn't matter what I do because I'm in like a herd and I'm not accountable for my actions. It's like a mob mentality.
Yep.
And that's what I've seen with Facebook and things, that people treat people. I've seen people treat me ways that like I'll see them the next week in a store and they're like, I can tell they're embarrassed, but they act like nothing has happened. I'm like,
Next time you
no,
should be
you just
like,
did that.
next time you should be
did
like,
that.
remember last week when you said that stuff?
So
Do you
anyway,
want to talk
picking up on
about
this
it?
comment, do you have any follow-ups?
Right.
Yeah, follow us.
You should jump on YouTube and post YouTube videos. Worse.
Is it worse? Oh, God.
Gosh, that's true, and also we take the humanity out of it too. It's just an like we talk about this. It's just an avatar, and yeah, you can say whatever you want because you're not accountable to anybody. Just do it and log off.
It really reveals, that's the kind of stuff that really reveals anonymity, whatever. That really reveals the reality of human nature being what it is, which is one of the reasons why I'm like, I won't ever say left-leaning because I don't think in those terms, but it's forward-moving as I am. That's one of those areas where I'm like, man, everything that we know about human psychology when it acts independent of pressure, of accountability, of systems, of peers, confirms the reality of the fall.
Yeah.
And a corrupt human nature. As Don Miller said, he said, you take two kids and you raise them up in the same environment, except one has rules and the other one does not have rules. Guess which one is going to actually grow up to be a better kid? So there you go. Parents who don't believe in authoritative raising, authoritative raising. Laissez-faire parenting.
Laissez-faire.
And I have no idea where we are in that book, so it's probably a director we've been on, but I might be confused.
Well, I'll throw something new about this because later there's a reference towards like a stabbing of the Pope. You see that below there? When I was in Indonesia in 2008, two of the master painters, like they're considered like living masters of Philippines, met us in Bali to paint. And this one guy, everything he painted was negative about the Catholic Church. It was all like priest long noses over. He was like considered the master painter of the country. Like he definitely had a grudge against the Catholic Church, and like that was what all his work was about. That's all he painted about. Priests with multiple eyes and long noses, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So they obviously have something in the Philippines against the Catholics. So
That's interesting.
All right, so let's jump to chapter 5 here. But just who is going to coordinate these scales of values? So this is exactly what we've been talking about. And how is it to be done? Who is going to create for all humanity one single unitary system of evaluation? For evil deeds and for good deeds, for what is intolerable and what is tolerable, and where the boundary between them lies today. Who is going to clarify for all humanity what is genuinely heinous and unbearable, and what merely scrapes our skin because of its proximity, and thereby direct our wrath against what is really the most terrible, and not against what is merely the nearest? Just who is there who might be able to communicate such an understanding that the barriers of personal human experience? Who is there who might possibly be able to instill in the bigoted, narrow, stubborn human essence the grief and joy of those far away, and the perception of a range of facts and illusions never personally experienced? I mean, I think he just nailed social media
Facebook.
with that right there. Well, I was thinking about the Donahue interview with Milton Friedman, when Milton Friedman was saying that, we're going to have these great bureaucrats in there who are going to help us create society better. And he goes, well, Donahue, Milton Friedman saying, he's like, Donahue, where are these angels who are going to create laws for us? Are you one of them? I don't trust you, and I know you don't trust me. So where are these angels who are going to come down and be omnibenevolent and create this amazing utopia? Where are they? Well, they're not found here. Not found in us. Here's what I know about myself. I'm a monster. I am an absolute monster when I contemplate the capacity of what I could do. What thoughts cross my mind? I don't trust myself.
I feel like that's the what is it, proverbial beast system that keeps coming up to the top and keeps getting pushed back down. That global unification that keeps happening. Who will be, how does it go? Who will be the speaker from, what was it in the book that it was saying?
Who is going to clarify for all humanity what is genuinely heinous and unbearable and what is merely scrapes our skin because of its proximity? Who is going to create for all humanity the single unitary system of evaluation for good deeds and bad deeds?
We have some of that rising up right now. We got some strange World Economic Forum that's trying to speak for the rest of the world, or hate to throw Bill Gates in there, but it's those kinds of things that they're stepping up, trying to fill that role.
And so why are we? Why is that push? Why are we pushing for that? Because humanity's always pushed for that. Mm-hmm. But why?
Why now, you mean? Or why
no, just why in general. Why are we pushing? I mean, I have my thoughts on it. I just want to know if anybody... Well, so why are we pushing for globalization? Why are we pushing for unity? Why are we pushing for one... why are we pushing for one set of values to be usurped on top of another set of values to make everything fair? Why are we looking for fairness and equality and justice? What is perpetuating that?
Well, the one theory that I know would be the one world government that tried to get everybody under one roof, well, one roof, so to speak, and just have one power base.
Well, I think it's built into us, but it's just misguided. So we would be abusing the flip
there's
side
a
of that.
need to protect, to help our fellow human beings. I mean, everybody should feel that you would want to do that. But the outright push, for everything, I don't really get. I mean, we want to do good. I mean, it's our instinct to help one another. Or a lot of people, but I don't know. I wrestle with it.
The one world, unified world government, whatever. I would more argue, maybe this is cynical, but I would argue it's because we don't want to disagree anymore. We don't want to be challenged anymore.
We don't want what?
Want to be challenged.
We don't want to be challenged. We don't want to disagree. We want everyone to be on the same page, which is why there's all this fighting. We need people to agree with us.
Be peaceful. Don't argue.
I'm not saying that's fully it, but I'd say...
Well, it's really funny you said that because there was actually a post I saw the other day that made me giggle. And
It's gotta be true.
It better be on Facebook.
And it just made me giggle.
Breaking news.
And it said, people just really need to chill the blank out. We're floating in space on a giant rock that we can't leave. Look at the stars or something. Just stop being so awful. And I was like, oh, well, that really describes a lot of.
Spaceship.
I think if you look at, I don't think we give it enough attention to the story of Babel.
Just thinking
I
the
was
same thing.
I was
We're on the same
been thinking
page.
Tower of Babel
Because
over
I think
the whole
I
time.
think it hits on both sides of this because I think sometimes we look at that story and we sneer at it as we're like, oh gosh, you guys are so haughty and like, and yet you forget about the fact that you're talking about things like cooperation. You're talking about sharing. You're talking about you do this, I do this, you do this. And trying to really unify, and that is really good. I mean, God didn't slam them for partnering and working together. What He slammed them on is the fact that it was their pride and their hubris to say, we could partner enough to such a level, we can be unified on such a level that nothing, that we only answer to ourselves in our unification. And so we don't have to appeal to God anymore. We just appeal to us. And I think that is the story, honestly. We look at like Garden of Eden, but I think that's the story of the human race, is hubris. Every time we try and build up, and this is my concern, of course, with like Western society right now, is that we've gotten so hubristic and haughty that eventually it's got to collapse, and hence, we have enough good that it can totally be something that you can jump on board with, and to some degree should. But the question there is like, what is the nature? What is inside you? What is that thing that is behind or motivating some of the good action?
And also along with that is autonomy. That's what the serpent wanted at the beginning, is to create an autonomous race outside of God. And that's kind of unfortunately built into our hearts and the current sinful state. And the unification that is, I was thinking that earlier, is just that replaying of Babel over and over again. Now we have a lot of common language. We've got internet, we've got code, we've got English. I mean, it's just so much that's built up. Yeah.
But can we overcome the rhythm issue of what Solzhenitsyn brings up?
Because he allotted the boundaries of the nations, so now everybody is in their own rhythms. That's a tough hurdle. America's trying.
We can't even get the rhythms of Wilmore completely together. So we're going to think we're going to take over the world with all these rhythms. But it's to say that, so in order for us to even consider this, then we must think that there's an optimal rhythm. We must think that there's an optimal rhythm, or else we wouldn't try to force someone else for their own good. Terry's rhythm's wrong. I know what's best for him, and if I just put it on him, he'll see it later and he'll thank me for it. It'll be great. He'll love it.
And he'll comply. He'll comply first.
But Terry's going, no. Your rhythm is wrong because of this, and suddenly we have to come to this notion where there's more that I don't know than I know, and for me to have the hubris to say, I have unilateral, ontological, ubiquitous truth, and I'm going to say, this is this. I can't even consider those words because there's so much. If God exists, and he's outside of time and space, then the truth that can be known is incomprehensible. And in my 70 years, I can't even consider that I would even know enough. I'd probably barely know enough to stand upright in this. So my job is to simply do my best. My job is to simply tell the truth, not lie. Just the basic. If I just did the 10 Commandments, my life could be successful in the course of this life without me having to go, well, let me make life better for everybody. What if I just did those 10 things?
Yeah.
Those 10 things will create flourishing. Maybe someone else will do those as well. I love, Nina said it many years ago, but it was so concise and so brilliant. It's not our job to silence the racist. It's our job to show them a better way. And if we present truth through our experience and through our example, it may then encourage others to come alongside us. Not follow us, but come alongside of us and go, and that's what I hope we've created here, is something where we come alongside of each other and go, let's wrestle this out, because you know what? I'm not going to have it all right. You're not going to have it all right. But there are going to be good things that you're going to say that I'm going to take that. There's going to be good things you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to take that. There'll be some stuff you're like, nah, I don't know about that. But you know what? I may come back 3 or 4 years later and go, you know what? Nah, she was right. Yeah, I'm going to take that and bring it back in. But not to have the hubris, but to have the humility to go, man, I don't know. This guy's seen some stuff. Does he have something worth me checking out and listening to and seeing what's going on?
Can I add or just throw something in there?
Yeah.
Because I think what you said that means that there is I think room, and I think there's Christian room in deep theological room and social room for a more defined and more nuanced concept of advocacy. Because I think what you're talking about wanting to do good for others, is definitely part of it. But I think that can be so confused with perspective and opinion and things like that, right? Let's show them a better way. But I think that there are certain times if somebody is, say, coming at your kids or coming at your neighbor or something like that with racist slurs or whatever, that there is a certain Christian level that says, now there are these fundamental truths that we all know that we do voice. You know what I mean? And I think that has to have some room in this conversation about truth.
So, you're saying is that there should be moments to silence.
I do. I think so.
See, I would say
Moments
that moments to silence.
That there are moments to silence.
See, I would say that given time, bad philosophies will burn themselves out.
Oh, I totally agree.
And so there won't be a need to silence, because what you will see over time is you will see the philosophy won't bear fruit. One philosophy will, and people will go, well, I don't want this because it brings chaos. This over here brings peace. And so you can say your horrible rhetoric. You can say those things. Now, if you attempt to do something towards me, yeah, I'm going to stop you. But if somebody hurls something at me, I may say, hey, stop that. But I don't have to shut them up. I don't have to silence them.
I'm not even normally saying in reference to you.
Right.
Because you have a Christian duty to bear that. I'm mostly talking about in love of neighbor, that I think the Scripture says that there are certain truths that do deserve voicing in protection and love of our neighbor. And those usually are the moral absolute truths. Those are the fundamental universal truths that they're not based off of some humanist progressive philosophy.
Right.
They're based off of really divine ontology, divine command.
I think it depends on what you're talking about. If you're just talking about a moment of someone at Wilmore Elementary called Alex a black turd, okay? I said, Alex, why don't you go talk to him about it?
Beat that kid.
I wanted to. So in that instance, he went and took him aside and beat him up. No, he didn't. He took him aside and said, hey, what did you mean when you said that? Gave the kid an opportunity to say it. Of course, the kid was like, I call everyone that. No, he doesn't. So I don't think it's like you just sit back and don't say anything. So I don't know if that's what you're getting at. But because there's definitely moments where you stand up and you speak. But so I think the whole philosophy of showing people a better way is not about just never speaking up. It's more about, I don't know if that's.
See, I'm thinking more of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, people going. They didn't go politically. They didn't go in any bureaucratic measures. There were no laws, no policies. They simply stood and says, we're going to show you non-violently that if given the choice, people will accept us, people will change if they're shown a better way.
Right.
And that's kind of what so that's what I'm saying. Not saying that you shouldn't speak out against language, or you shouldn't speak out and say that's not the right language.
It
or
seems
there's better
more like
language.
let's not censor, like all the censorship that's going on right now. Instead of closing down someone's account, allow the fruit and goodness and truth rise to the top.
Right.
Maybe.
That's more what I'm. Because what happens is, so for me, when you get into the position, this is exactly what Solzhenitsyn went through. Was he wrote an article when he was in the army that was just critical of some of Stalin's things. He wound up in a gulag.
Right.
And you go, well, if Solzhenitsyn was wrong about Stalin, it would have played out, and they would have read he was wrong because he wasn't telling the truth. And then, don't listen to that guy. it would have faded away. But instead, he goes to prison, and Solzhenitsyn learns a ton about himself and a ton about others, and comes out, and through his writing actually defeats Stalin.
Right.
Or do we
through
radicalize
language.
people further when we censor them and
Yeah.
silence them?
And that's that long view of beauty saves the world, you know. But I don't think we're disagreeing as much as kind of just working out that there's various different nuances. And
Well, absolutely.
like that, right? Like, what is the difference between censorship and being silent, you know, or keeping people, you know, or speaking up.
And like when Wes and I had that conversation several years ago, it was birthed out of a bigger conversation of everyone was yelling at each other, and everyone was, you know, you're racist, so stop talking. You're this, stop talking. And so no one arrived anywhere because there was no compassion, there was no conversation, there was no understanding. And then you have this black musician who goes to this bar where all these KKK people come, and he's like, I'm going to have conversations with these dudes. And, you know, he 70-some or 200 300 robes, KKK robes later, he's a man who has talked all these hundreds of people out of the KKK because he sat down and talked to them. And that's, like, I think more of the heart of that, because I do believe in advocacy as well, not as the way the world portrays it currently. But it's more of a frustration with how the world is screaming at each other, and no action is being done instead of being the change.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think even when we're talking about how social media is used and stuff like that, everybody's an advocate for something, right? And I'm just saying, given what he's saying here, a lot of those words need better clarification, because I think you realize that a lot of people are not advocates. Advocating anything, they're propositioning something. And so part of our job, I think, is to really help reclaim that and say, hey, if you really want to advocate for something, that's fine. Here's what that looks like, and here's what that doesn't look like.
Do you think people are being advocates for selfishness? I mean, because they think that there's an end goal for them to be right. So in that goal for them to be right, that's their selfish reason.
I think that's the Tower of Babel again. Yeah, there is some element of that. That doesn't mean that it's all. I just think it might be that it's just twisted. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's heinous or immoral or anything like that. It just means that there's always this twist on it. And I think you can have that twisted in good actions and good, you know, all of that kind of stuff too, is that it still kind of ends up pointing here, which is why we really have to check our motives and intentions, whatever it is that we say, whatever it is that we for.
I agree.
You got it. Yeah, I like that.
100%.
I think that the difficulty of the times right now is the lack of humility, where it's like the thing that's in our faith that would really solve a lot of issues is understanding the fallenness. Is that what I see when I see a lot of like value signaling is what I see people trying to cover their sin with a signal, and they're so afraid, the difficulty with humanism is believing that we're innately good, our hearts are innately good, except for exterior circumstances, exterior pressures. I just think, scripturally that's just not correct. We actually we want to be good. I think that people want to be good. I think that a lot of the fringe things like Antifa, I think people they have a moral hole, but we've robbed them of actually a foundation, so they're just hungry for filling it with some sort of righteousness.
That is so interesting.
Does that make
say
sense?
That. Yes, because it actually gives me a different perspective on my family, and that because if you look at Facebook, all you know is that they are from Appalachia.
Yeah.
You don't know the drug use and everything else that is underneath it. So they're hiding that, standing on a moral high ground, that they are right in this, trying to hide something else.
Yeah, so if you put a pin on something, if you say, like a phrase, I don't like anti-phrases, like anti-racist, why can't you have a positive spin on it? Why can't you have it sounds kind of strange.
That was Mother Teresa's philosophy.
Well, that you shouldn't have an anti.
Yeah, she didn't want to go to an anti-war protest. She wanted to go to a pro-peace rally.
Yeah, it's like there's something about it where it's like I've seen this happening with students at Asbury. Just if I throw this on here, I will never have to deal with the fact that I'm innately bad. God has created me to good, but my heart is innately bad.
It's very interesting.
And that's what I see. I see like the difficulty I've seen is especially like when I get these struggles with family members who are kind of Christian left for Christian right, and is that they're looking for moral, like the fights that happen where it's like they're looking for points to cover things so that they never have to deal with their darkness.
Yeah.
Like heart of darkness.
Yeah.
If I believe the right thing, therefore I'm good.
Yeah, so I never have to actually or if I've just, let's talk about what's going on now. If I just cancel this person, see, I've canceled the evil, I've stomped it out, I therefore am good. You never have to look at me.
It's a very,
I'm no longer, it's like blood over, like the priestly blood over the doorway.
So
And
true.
so that's one of my issues that I have, as you were talking about that, Randy, is I feel like if you, and you may not even be meaning this is just me thinking, if we begin to tell people this is what advocacy looks like, and we try to tell people this is what you do as an advocate, you take away alternatives for them, and I think you actually create more radicals that way. I think because you say, so let's just take Facebook right now where they're saying, okay, if you mention voter fraud, this is back in the day, your posts were taken away. Well, I think what you did was you took away people's ability to express, hey, I think there was voter fraud. They can't go anywhere to do it. So now they're like, you took this away from me, and it just kind of builds in
Made
here.
outlaws.
Yes.
And they're like, well, I'm an outlaw now, and so it just builds up.
Made martyrs.
And most of this, so that whole story with Hunter Biden
You're
on the
okay
New York,
with being an outlaw too, in that
Right.
respect. In that respect, you're okay with being an outlaw because
feel
you
like
stuck
you're
up
right.
for yourself.
because you stuck up. Yeah, you stuck up for yourself. Whereas I remember the Hunter Biden story that came out with the laptops. The New York Post put it out, and Twitter canceled it right away and said this is fraudulent. Well, the thing was, the story he got 10 times the views and got out there because they tried to cancel it. And you go, to me, if you let everything just be fair, put it out there, that truth will out at some point. And people will. I mean, I just think about this. I think I said this last week, but maybe I did, maybe I didn't. The majority of America are not part of the KKK. They've been able to speak for hundreds of years. But most people aren't part of that. Why? Because it's a bad philosophy. It doesn't bring flourishing. It only brings pain and suffering. It doesn't bring cooperation. And so people are like, that's not a game I want to play. And so even though they're in an open forum, they're allowed to spread their propaganda, people aren't buying it. And so I think if you let those things play out, the kooks it'll happen. People are saying all this stuff about certain parts of voter fraud. Well, it turned out that they weren't true. And then people started to go, wait, that wasn't true. Okay. For me, I'm more letting people wrestle things out. Here's the problem, is because I've been so a part of so many narrow groups that I don't want to silence anybody. I don't want to push, because I don't know how many times I've looked at people and looked at my Trinitarian friends and said, you guys are going to hell. I preached it for years and believed that people were going to hell.
I was one of those sermons. No, I wasn't.
And now I affirm the Trinity, but I didn't for many years. And so what if somebody would have canceled me, not let me, I would have been, or what if I could have had the power to cancel them? And like you guys, well, it would have radicalized them a little bit, or it would have, I wasn't right. And I don't want to even put my thumb on somebody and go, you can't speak because you're doing this incorrectly. Because am I doing it correctly? That's kind of my personal opinion on that.
I don't think we're 100% disagreeing. And I think we're wrestling to some degree with teleology.
Yeah.
Where is this going? How does it end? And also the questions of human capability capability, social capability, human capability, and human nature, and wrestling with those two things combined, because we know what we're capable of on a positive level, but we also know what we're capable of on a broken level. And it is, to some degree, it's a question of entropy. Do we as a society, without adding something into a system, for lack of a better word, social system, a population, a group, a community, whatever, do we ultimately fragment into destruction, or do we actually grow? And I think part of our difference here is that I think there needs to be, whereas you're more laissez-faire about let it work out, philosophy will win in. I think history bears out that we always have had guides along the way. And without those guides, I don't think we would ever make it to these places. Because I think even people like him, like Lewis, like whoever, we still point to one of the reasons we revere these people, because we're like, man, they were these wise guides along the way that even though when we were losing our way, they helped us get our way back. And I think that's totally different than enforcement. To be a guide is not to be the person in the back with the whip, saying go this way, go, somebody saying, and that's the way I think you see Jesus too, is like, follow me along the way. It is your decision to follow me. And ultimately at the end you'll realize that if you don't follow me, like it would have been better if you had. But we don't see a God that's like, unless you're a Calvinist, of course.
Right.
But we don't see a God that's saying, you're following me.
Right.
Do it. And so I think to some degree, like, I think we're wrestling with those two questions. Capability, human nature.
Right.
You're more laissez-faire. I'm more, I think humanity needs guides that can do things like, here's some help. Here's some nuance. Here's some new definitions. Here's something to work with.
I'm not laissez-faire about it. I am, given the choice, people will choose the game that helps them flourish as opposed to not. If I can make things, the more things I can make irrelevant in my life.
Unless you have the element of fear.
Huh?
Unless you add the ingredient of fear.
Well, so the thing is, what social media is doing is making us distrust each other because I don't know what game you're playing. You could out me. I could go in somewhere and not wear a mask, and somebody go, they're going to call the cops on me. Who can I trust? And suddenly I start to go, so I start looking around. That's not a game that we all want to play if we start knocking on each other. So what I'm saying is, yeah. So what I'm saying is that there's a game that we can play, and we have played in the West, where I can sit here right now and know that nobody in this room is going to take me out and shoot me in the back of the head. Because it's in everybody's benefit for us not to do that, because we're playing this game where if I flourish, you flourish, and as a society in general, the society flourishes because we let things effervesce and we don't try to go top down approach in government. Now I'm all about guides. I think guides are necessary, and what we do is, like you say, Lewis and Solzhenitsyn, to me, those are guys that are pointing and saying, hey, go this way, turn left, turn right, go this way. But what I don't want to see is I don't want to see somebody go, you're wrong, shut up, sit down,
Yeah, I don't think we want to see that either. And I do think part of the reason why you also know that there's we're all seeking this collective flourishment here is because you know the nature of the people that are in this group. Whereas if you were sitting in a Bible study 3 years ago in Charleston, South Carolina, and some guy sat down, you could have said the same thing and been completely wrong, because there is that question of human nature. Not everybody really does want human flourishment.
But 99.9% of the people do. That's why we get on airplanes.
Collectively, or for the personal?
Oh, I think both. I think collectively and personally. I think most people, even when people do things bad, they think they're doing it for good reasons. Nobody really does.
It's so much perception, because when I hear the word collective, I start getting afraid.
I just mean
like,
groups of people.
Well, I mean, like, when you think about human flourishing, like, when I hear the word collective, I think oppression.
Right.
Just because
I'm talking about, like, nation states.
Yeah. I'm saying, like, because he asked the question, personally or collective. So he's making a statement about like intentionality. Am I right? Like about what their intention, like, are they wanting flourishing just for themselves or collectively? And like,
Well, I think
the
we want-
perception on that
we
question
have to have
changes
both.
it. We do have to have both.
Or we don't have roads, or we don't have businesses, we don't have police
Absolutely,
departments, we don't have those
absolutely.
things.
Most people will choose the individual over the collective.
I don't think so.
But space is an issue.
I think
It's like a house. Like when a house is too small and you have too many kids in the house, you can make it work. But like my wife said, when they moved, when they had 4 or 5 kids, they moved to a bigger house. All the fighting stopped. Europe is like known for wars for thousands of years. It was just too tight. When they moved to America and they started like expanding, yeah, there was wars, but more space, more elbow room.
See, I think we want to be comfortable. I think we want to be trusting, and I think that if I can play this game where, okay, I can sit here with you and I can offer you an opinion. You can offer me an opinion, and suddenly we start to play this game, and then you have something to offer, and I can pay money for that, and suddenly, so eBay's a good example of this. eBay was junk that people were selling out of their garages, and people were going to give them money. The thought was that people would be selling trash and people would not be paying them for it. And so they had these brokers in the beginning that would broker a deal. There was a middleman at eBay. What they found out was 99% of the transactions were good. And so the brokers they went away because they weren't needed, because people wanted to prosper. And they wanted to be, I want you to have your money, I want to get the stuff from you. And that was...
So wouldn't you say that it's the self-preservation that leads to the ideology of the collective prospering?
Yes, I think so. So I think what you're saying there, it benefits me if we have trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think then that's still
Yeah.
reductions to you, which I think if it doesn't then benefit you, then you really are willing to sacrifice the collective as long as it's going to continue to benefit you. And I think that's where you see some of the most despotic, immoral regimes and stuff like that throughout history, where you used to all of a sudden see individuals choosing themselves over against the collective. And we may be taking a rabbit.
Yeah, I think we are.
I know that same
I do think
statement.
it's to some degree all comes back, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're hitting around the
This
same.
is important subject matter because it's helping me think things through. I think
Yeah.
it's good. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's like what you're just saying. I'm just seeing it from the other side. I think the worst regimes. It's like there used to be this statement in every kind of like superhero literature is the good of the many over the good of the one.
Yeah.
In other words, you give yourself up, but it's switched to now the
But
good of the one over the good of the many.
Most of the atrocities come with there's a single instance that happens in most atrocities, and it is when one group dehumanizes another
Absolutely.
group.
Yeah.
That is when you get the most heinous crimes. When the Jews become
Yeah.
vermin, or when black people are property, and you look and you suddenly go, and so that scares me when we have politicians and leaders who label whole collectives
They're doing
things
that. Yeah.
because that gives
Yeah.
their followers the ability to go, oh, I now can call this person this, and I'm saying on both sides of the aisle. I'm saying that radicalizes and go, oh yeah, you're a liberal, well you're an idiot. Not only you're an idiot, you're worse than an idiot. You're trash, and so then the atrocities that I can do to you are unconscionable because you're no longer human. But that's why social media is so bad. I'm looking at an avatar.
right.
Face to face, it is much harder for me because you bear the imago Dei. You have the image of God in you, and so I have to circumvent that somehow and create a way to dehumanize you so I can put those afflictions on you.
Well, and I think that one of the easiest ways to do that is to remove distinctions in people. Because,
Yeah.
and here's the thing about the difference between individuals and collective. If you can get the collective to look like the individual and the individual to look like the collective, you don't have as much internal strife to really deal with. So if this looks exactly like me, then I'm fully on board with whatever this actually says. It is much easier to go from A to B if everything else there looks similar. And again, the fact that we even have to talk about there being both sides rather than a whole crap ton of sides,
Oh, yeah.
I think
means that we're just reducing ourselves
That's
down
true. That's true.
to segments
We're dichotomizing everything.
Yeah.
We're creating false dilemmas. It's a youth pro dilemma all over again, where it's either A or B, and you go, no, it's not. It's there's other options. Like somebody said, I look. Yeah. Well, some people are like, and I say this too. It's like, I like to see both sides. You go, sometimes there's multiple sides. There's not just two sides. And actually, I want to be on the side of truth rather than a political side, because there are good things that liberals are bringing forth. There are good things that conservatives are bringing forth. But when you jump on board and you go, I'm a conservative, suddenly somebody can paint you something and go, aha, you're this, and conservatives, aha, you're this.
So I call myself a conservative liberal. It confuses the crap out of people, but you can't box me.
Right. Yeah. So this is really good, and these were the conversations I was hoping to have that Solzhenitsyn would bring up, because we're dealing. The human condition doesn't change from the Tower of Babel until here. It's not changed. The human heart is still. C.S. Lewis says that the black mark on the man's heart who has the authority and the ability to slay 1,000 people when he gets angry is the same black mark on a man that when he gets angry, everyone just laughs at him. It's the same black mark. That's justice. And you go, yeah. So Solzhenitsyn gets to a point in here where he tells us his admonishment to us on what we need to do and how we need to get through it. No matter what's going on, this is a simple rule: do this, and things not will get better, but like this is preservation for yourself. And I think it's going to be really good when we get to it. But we've gone past a little bit tonight because conversation was so good, and that's what I want. I want us to wrestle. I want us to come through and pull things out and have different perspectives and challenge each other and push back. Because again, I don't know. I just hope this helps us ask better questions, and so we can take what we've learned here from each other, go home, take our paradigms, take our prejudices, take our theologies, and if it doesn't fit, break it down and build it back up and see if that piece goes in there.
You know what I miss? I miss the days when I was in graduate school. I miss the days when, like, of course, UK art department is like, you can just imagine. And I miss the days when you could argue about something. And there was a guy that I'm still good friends with. I'm good friends with him. He was exceptionally Marxist. And him and I would argue over ideas. But then we'd go have coffee together, espresso. And then when I see him in a gallery, he always gives me a hug, and I give him a hug. Yeah. And I love his work. And he's one of my best. He always says wonderful things about me and my work. Now it's like, it's just, I hate the atmosphere. It's like, if you don't agree with, if somebody doesn't agree with you, they decide to kill you. Yeah. And it's like, it's not like, my gallery owner, she died, Ann Towers, she was like the definition of a liberal, of like what you would think of a liberal. She's like really open to every idea, and she would ask me about faith, and she would even call me up one day, she's like, she had no basis for understanding Chris. She's like, Chris, can you tell me your testimony? She called me out of the blue. It's like, I've been watching you, you're the real deal. It's like, why do you believe what you believe? She called me out of the blue. And it was like this open dialogue and like mutual honoring. It's like, it breaks my heart that it's like, I just don't like that right now. It's like a really toxic environment.
Sucks.
It's a horrible environment. Yeah. And even I have friends in Homeland Security, and I have friends who are working for like high government kind of like stuff. And it's like, the verbiage in Homeland Security is so scary right now. That they're on a witch hunt for fascists, and they're on a witch hunt like it's just like McCarthyism, except for just pointed in a different direction. And that same kind of fallacy, and it's really bothersome. It's like really a scary time to be in America. And then the next thing is just like I'm really concerned about is like I woke up the other day, and there's like a logical end to like this cancellation of like and this like editing of anything. I woke up the other day and I recognized within the year, if this keeps going, they will demand verses come out of the Bible. They will put pressure on publishers, and before long they will stop publishing original texts of the Bible without it being edited, and it'll be hard to find an originally authoritarian from the Greek Bible anymore. it's not like it's perfect anyways, but I recognized this is coming down the road. It was like, I woke up one day, I'm like, things like this is like a crushing of information and knowledge. So that it's like, it's not even going to be available. And then I had this picture, it's just, it reminded me of scripture when it said, and the disciples, like, at Book of Acts, gave themselves some public reading of scripture. Remember that? They said that. It reminded me, it's like I saw this picture, I said, there's going to be a day, hoping if this keeps going in this direction, it may change. I said, there's going to be a day when all we're going to do in church is open up the Bible and read it, and people are going to weep and wail.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to be like food that they don't get. We're going to go from a gluttony where Bibles have thousands of Bibles that, what are we going to do with all these Bibles? Let's throw them away. You know what I'm talking about. To the Chinese church where they're like hungering for one page. And it's really bothersome to me that we're going down this road. It's the natural progression of the logic that's happening right now. And it's, I don't know. I'm just telling you what's been going through my mind. I just woke up and I'm like, this is coming.
The good news is I actually heard a testimony from somebody who lived in Russia during atheism and was a state religion. And he actually read the state book of atheism and found God through that. Because he said, if there is a God, he has to be the opposite of this. So as he was reading that book, God revealed himself.
So that's amazing.
And just go, oh, okay.
Stories like that.
Yeah, so he's like, they would read about all of the great things about humanism and atheism. And he would like, if God exists, he would be the opposite of this. And so every time he would read that, it would fill his heart and go, God's real. He's better than this. He's the opposite of this. So the opposite of this is truth. And every time he read it, it would just change the verbiage. And he found God, became a Christian, and it was just so. If God can use the mouth of a donkey, he can use a book on atheism to bring people to himself. So I think that's pretty cool.
I don't know. I'm just like thinking and just because after Russia fell, there's 1 million Jews that immigrated to Israel. And one of the things that you see about the Jews is they knew nothing. Stalin had completely erased their history. They came in the old ponds, which is the language classes, and they're like, who can tell me about King David? They had no idea who King David was. They had no idea who anybody, they knew nothing. It was like completely erased, except for just this little seed of like, well, I'm a Jew in their heart. Erased. Anyways.
This was their college?
This is, remember in late 80s when Russia fell?
Oh, okay.
When they fell, 1 million Jews left, and a lot of them just walked from Russia to Israel. They didn't even know why they were going. They just showed up. And when they started to get language lessons, it was revealed that they knew nothing. They didn't know anything of their faith. They didn't have a faith. It was just like a seed.
They knew enough
To go.
There you
Yes,
go.
they had
That's a
the
super
guide.
natural.
They had the waypost.
Yeah, they had
They
the
said, I need to
waypost.
go that way.
Yep.
And then once they got there, they're getting more and then more, and they're
I guess that's the hope, the part of me that's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I love Wes's hope, but I'm also like, when a tsunami goes through, people die.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not always rosy and sunshine. I have a lot of
I
bad.
like it about you.
I have a lot of bad days,
I
but
need that. I need that
Yeah.
about you. I was like, I
It-
need
it's-
that.
It's hard to look at the world today like it is, but there's also always, because there is a God, there is always going to be hope.
yeah,
It may be very hard to find
Yeah.
sometimes, but there is always going to be hope. It'll be like in Fahrenheit 451. They were burning all the books, and then firemen found that these groups of people, their job was to memorize this book. And your job is to memorize this book. Your job is to memorize this book. Your job is to memorize this book. And it's going to keep that alive, that history. That's going to still be
yeah.
It's interesting. It's like there's that hope there. That's really. We just haven't got to that level where we needed that kind of
Well,
hope.
then there's that movie, the Book of Elijah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking.
Eli.
about it.
I was going to say, I prefer the one.
Yeah, Book of Eli.
Yeah. No, I mean it's.
All right, guys, we'll close this out tonight and pick back up again next Monday. So this is Solzhenitsyn Part 4. Further up.
further in.